Good morning. Good morning. I was a bit concerned when they gave me a Brittany mic. I'd have to do an aerobics class as well. But it's okay. Excellent. I wonder when was the last time you acted on a generous impulse? Just the other day, I found myself in Costa Coffee. I'd ordered, I was waiting for my drink to be made, and I was aware that the person behind me in the queue was holding this sandwich and wondering how much is it going to cost. And you could see the dilemma go through her mind. Have I got enough to pay for this sandwich? The sandwich, at the end of the day, it's marked down by 50%, and let's just gloss over the fact that nobody could work out what 50% off the money was. It worked out to be £2.57. And this girl stood there and go, okay, taps the card. And it's that embarrassing sound of rejection. And it beeps. She tries again. And it doesn't work. And you can just see in her body the sense of, I can't get the sandwich. Generous impulse came over me. I'll get it for you. I instinctively found myself in a generous posture as a generous disciple, never stifling a generous impulse. Thank you, Bishop Graham, for that introduction. I fear that lots of the things that you've said, I'm going to say, which is great, isn't it? And just to spook you a little bit, the love will follow through in my stuff. My background is in church, as I grew up in the Salvation Army. My parents are Salvation Army officers. And so I have a very practical theology in my growing up. And I currently attend a Methodist church. We attend the Methodist church and we attend our local Anglican church as well. For the various different services as a family. Generosity is a thread that runs through the Bible. God gave his only son. The Good Samaritan is a story of generosity. Mary pouring out the perfume. If you want to know a bit more about that, speak to Jonathan later on. He has a great series about Mary and the perfume. The early church gave everything to live from a place of generosity. It's one of the central tenets of the gospel. And I believe we have a generous God. And if we're made in God's image, then we too are a generous disposition. As I was preparing for this, I decided in my town we've got a Christian bookshop. It's very rare these days, but we've got one. So I went in it. And I'm going through the books and having a look to see. And the sweet volunteer from the bookshop comes over and goes, "Can I help you?" Which was code for, "Please stop thumbing all the books. This is not a library." And I go, "Can you tell me where the books of generosity are?" Oh, we haven't got any of those. Funny then that this quote, "Never stifle a generous impulse," comes from William Hewlett, as in Hewlett-Packard Computers. And it's the opening to a Jim Collins book called Beyond Entrepreneurship. And I've learned to lean into this quote, to never stifle a generous impulse in my own discipleship journey. It's a motto that I've adopted, and I encourage you to adopt. So today, I want us to consider this morning the importance of a generous posture in our discipleship. If you want a generous church, then you and I need to be generous disciples. One of my prayer partners is a gentleman called Stefan. Stefan is from Moldova. He lives in Birmingham. And each week he comes to Matlock to sell the big issue. Now, Stefan was stood on the corner a couple of years ago as I was walking down the street to go and get the milk. I've just read this quote, "Never stifle a generous impulse." I'm walking down and I'm met by Stefan. Excuse me. I'm met by Stefan, and he's got the biggest smile. And I have a generous impulse just to go and say hello. He lives by faith, and we've shared Bible stories, we've shared the goodness of God, and we pray for each other. But he has all he needs because of the generosity of God. And he is my generosity inspiration. He's the person I think of when we think about generosity, how he emits the generosity. He has nothing, yet he's one of the most generous people I know. He trusts in God to provide. Sometimes I go along to him and I say, "Can I get you something? Can I get you some bread? Can I get you some a sandwich?" And he goes, "No, I've got everything I need today. Ask me tomorrow." It's a beautiful picture of generosity, isn't it? He's been given everything he needs. And rather than over-receiving, he's going, "No, actually, I've received from God. Thank you, God," is his words. Now, there's many ways in which we can be generous. It's not just about the money, and I'm not just going to talk about money this morning either. So what does a generous disciple look like? A generous disciple, I think, needs to learn to listen. Proverbs 18:13. "If one gives answer before hearing, it is folly and shame." How easy is it to hear a conversation and jump straight in and not listen? That's an act of generosity, to actually stop and understand what is being said. James 1:5. "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." So we've got generous wisdom. I'm here today because of the people that are in my church who imparted their wisdom in my growing up. And it's because of those people who generously gave into me and invested into me that I've journeyed in my faith to be in a place today where I am. So I'm grateful for the generosity of wisdom. Thessalonians 5:11. "Therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing." Encouragement is an act of generosity. We can encourage freely. Paul models it in that latter part of the verse, just as in fact you are already doing. He's generous with his encouragement. I wonder who you can be generously encouraging to in this week. 1 Peter 4:10. "Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms." It's a generous service. As we heard from Bishop Grain already, we are reliant on the people who give their service to the church. So whichever rota you find yourself on tomorrow, do it generously. And of course, a generous disciple is a generous giver. Jesus says in Matthew, when he's been pushed by he's been pushed to be tricked, and he says, "Pay the emperor what belongs to the emperor, and pay God what belongs to God." So let's just touch on the money for a little bit. Yes, there are different interpretations of how we should give, how much we should give, all of that good stuff. But I think we are all in agreement, we're all aligned that we should give. I think what is important is that we choose to give from a place of discipleship, a place of worship, a place of prayer, a place of sacrifice, a place of love. It's the why you do it rather than the how much that is important on our journey with Christ. And as the why becomes stronger, the act of worship becomes stronger, that understanding of a generous posture in our discipleship with God, then yes, the amount we can give is going to increase. We recognize that what we have received is from God, and we are giving back to God. Bishop Matthew Porter writes in his book, The Art of Giving, that cheerful giving is radical. It defies the power that money can hold on us. We're called to be cheerful givers. So I wonder, do you approach the collection plate with fear or joy? Have you been strong-armed into giving and have got a bad taste? Or are you giving from a place of worship? Are you encouraging your churches to give from a place of worship, from a place of love? Let's be radical in how we give, because if we give individually and corporately, we create generous churches. There was one day walking through Matlock where we live, and Stefan's there, and it's a hot summer's day. It was last year. Was there with my children, Benji, who was 5 at the time. We've only been out the house 5 minutes, and obviously it's a hot day, and he wants a drink of water. And guess whose job it was to bring the water bottles? And I'd forgotten. That's okay. We're outside a shop, and I go, look, okay. We'll go and get a drink. That's fine. We're only literally like 5 minutes from the house. It's like, it's not going to die of dehydration. But we're there, and I'm going, look, we'll just talk to Stefan, we'll say hello, and then we'll go and get you a drink. Stefan hears and he sees. And in this beautiful moment, he goes, I've been given more than enough. Have my drink, Benji. What a beautiful moment of someone who is in absolute poverty, living in a hostel, who can give. He can give from what he has freely received. If ever you are wondering, can places in high levels of deprivation give? Yes, they can. Let's be bold about that, because actually we all freely receive and we all freely can give. I think when we look at giving, it's important to note that you can't give from empty. You can't just magic some money up or magic some energy. You have to give from a place where you've received. So when you think of your personal circumstances, I think it's important to recognize freely you have received, freely you give. Generosity comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. I went to St Aidan's Church of England High School in Harrogate in North Yorkshire. And St Aidan's High School has a really strong relationship with its roots of St Aidan. It's a Church of England High School. And I found an affinity, a love of Lindisfarne through that. We go on our school trip in year 7 to go and understand who this St Aidan was that's plastered all over the school, and the imagery of St Aidan was everywhere in the school. So we got to understand St Aidan, and one of the stories about St Aidan I love is he's there almost on appointment from the king. And the king goes, I'm seeing you do all of your ministry. You're walking everywhere. And so I can make it easier for you, Aidan. Here, have my prized horse. It's one of my best horses. And Aidan goes, thanks. I'm going to give it to him over there. He gives it away. Freely received, freely give. What's interesting is that Aidan has built around him a group of other learners, disciples of Aidan, and one of them is called Chad. Now, Chad turns up in Lichfield as the Bishop of Mercia, And in a very similar way that the story kind of rolls through, the Archbishop of Canterbury sees Chad walking, because obviously that's what he's learnt to do. This is like 687 AD. It's what you do. And so the Archbishop of Canterbury gives Chad a horse. And in the book On Angels' Wings, it tells the story of how Chad has this dilemma. Do I do what Aidan taught me to do, to go and give this horse away that I've just received from the Archbishop? How's the Archbishop going to cope if I go, thank you, but no thanks? Or do I keep it? He chooses to keep the gift. He receives that gift, and he uses that gift to build his ministry. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. I think it's really interesting that we can receive freely and use for God's benefit, or we can give and allow that to flourish in somewhere else. He speaks to us, God speaks to us individually, and asks us to reflect his goodness. So I wonder, what is God asking you to do with what he's given you? Maybe it's to use your gifts in service. Maybe it's to give something to someone else. We're not the same. It's going to be different. That infectiousness of generosity carries through. And if we want to build generous churches, then we need to build generous disciples. And generous disciples are going to build generous churches. And so there's the flywheel of generosity. There's lots of stuff out there around culture of generosity, and I implore you to go and look at those things. I know Jonathan spoke at this conference last time about mint and idea, and they're really helpful concepts to go and implement some of this stuff. But the flywheel of generosity is where we say, let's do some generous actions, just some small things, and let's see some visible results from that generosity. Let's trust God that God's going to turn that generosity into something that's tangible, that's visible. And then people around you will see that act of generosity. They'll be energized by your generosity. The momentum starts to build. You can then do some more actions. And then it goes around that cycle again. And as a flywheel turns and it keeps going and it builds, we start to build momentum towards a generous church. What does a generous church look like? I think a generous church looks like somewhere where the people who gather together share their gifts, share in life, and God multiplies it. Yes, there'll be a welcoming atmosphere. Yes, there'll be active outreach. Yes, there'll be good stewardship. Yes, it's service orientated. Yes, there's generous giving. There's good teaching and discipleship. There's prayer and there's support. The thing is, when we give from a place of love and obedience to his prompting, God multiplies it. Ephesians 3:20, God can do more than you can imagine through his power working in you and me. A few years ago, I was disturbed by a dream. The dream was, really clearly, to put some money in an envelope. And I'm a bit like, okay, what's this? Ignore it. Next night, Grant, put the money in the envelope. And I can't get rid of this dream. It just keeps reoccurring. Every morning I wake up. And so, I pluck up that courage, I go and get the money out of the bank, and I put it in an envelope, and I put it in the drawer. And I'm like, God, come on. What's going on? Why have I put this money in an envelope? The next thing I get is a name. And it's someone I know, someone who leads the church that we go to. And I say to him, I've got this money in an envelope. I think it's for someone in the congregation. And look, I'm going to give you this envelope next Sunday, and you can pass it on to wherever God tells you to pass it on to. So he goes, okay, yep, I'll pray about that and we'll see what we do. The next week comes along and he says, Grant, I think that money's for us. And I'm like, what? What's going on? Turns out that his family situation meant that his daughter needed a particular medical test that costs £400. And they didn't have the £400 to go and spend on that thing. It was a really important thing that would unlock loads of support for his daughter. And I was one of 4 people that had been prompted to give. So God took my generosity and multiplied it to go and do some great stuff. The story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 is a story of multiplication. Jesus takes the bread and the fish and he breaks it and he gives thanks. We have a story of multiplication. There's generosity. God multiplies the generosity when it's given in worship. The Quiet Revival report is showing that churches are growing. And because churches are growing, I saw last night that Eden Bookshop, you know, the place to go and buy your Christian books online, not that I'm backed by them, are celebrating a 58% increase in sales in Bibles. That's brilliant, isn't it? Why did that strike me last night? Well, as a church in Matlock decided at the beginning of this year to gift a Bible to every school child in our town. We were unaware of this. It's a different church. And my son and my daughter came home from school one day and their bags are so heavy. They're like, what have you got from the library this week? Because this is really heavy. And it turns out they'd been gifted this Bible. The church had raised money. They'd bought these Bibles. They're really good Bibles, by the way, like really good ones. And my kids are going, let's read it. Let's read it tonight. And we've read these Bibles. They're both the same, but we've read them both, cover to cover, several times in the last 6 weeks alone. And that's becoming part of our daily rhythm, that they're going to get the Bible that they were gifted, and they're receiving God's goodness through that. Multiplication from our generosity. At the Parish Giving Scheme, we see generosity every single day. I have the absolute pleasure to lead a team where it's our job to receive the generosity of people in congregations, in towns, who want to support the local church. And we receive that money through our scheme to be able to distribute it to churches. Many of you are already using the Parish Giving Scheme. Many of you are using it as a church and using it as individuals. So you are part of the 80,000 givers, the 5,000 churches, and in 2024, your giving was part of the £100 million that we processed. It's an incredible level of generosity that we see every single day. If you've not heard of PGS, we offer a really simple solution to be able to give financially. That generosity of finance. We offer you really simple administrative support. It's easy and secure to access the system, to get your statements, so you can see how much has been given. It leads to stable and increased giving. And we help to solve static giving. If you've not come across static giving, well then think about in 2014, when you went and bought something for £10, the reality is in 2023, that same thing that was costing you £10 would now cost you £12.91 in line with inflation. Yep, with me? If you're giving £10 a month and you're in 2014 and you're still giving £10 a month in 2023, you do the maths. What we're asking is we invite people to inflate their giving in line with inflation. Now, I don't actually think inflationary increased giving is actually that generous. I'll be bold. Don't actually think it's that generous, because all you're doing is you're keeping your money in line with inflation. It's just keeping the value. What's really exciting is that in our stats, we see people who, yes, they receive that notification, and they go, oh, okay, it's going up by 22p. Let's round that up. And it increases. And there is a slice of our data, a slice of our givers, who choose to increase their giving beyond inflation. And I think that's brilliant. And all it takes is an invitation to join that flywheel of generosity, an invitation to journey in discipleship, to give generously. We're about advancing regular giving in every church. That's what we do as the parish giving scheme. So I wonder what you'll do the next time you have a generous impulse. How will you respond? And I hope that through days like today, engaging with the content, engaging with the workshops, that you'll be able to join as a church in your setting on that flywheel of generosity. And as that flywheel of generosity starts to turn and starts to build momentum, you'll see the kingdom come in greater ways than you can imagine in your church.